All right, viewers, welcome to the Black Agenda Podcast. I'm the co-host, Adrian Devin, along with my co-host, Devin Dito. And today we're just bringing you another edition of our weekly roundup, and we got a lot to cover, so we're going to get right into it. Our first segment really is going to go over the latest on Breonna Taylor. We just saw a lot of pictures. I think there, according to WLEX NBC 18 in Lexington, Kentucky, there were more than 1,200 pictures inside of Breonna Taylor's home. It shows bullet holes in all of her belongings, from the shower, the chairs, mirrors, cabinets. I don't know. It's just a lot going on with this case, Devin. I think we're 5 or 6 months into this, and there's still been no justice brought to Breonna Taylor and her family. The officers haven't been charged. I think maybe on administrative leave, but none of them have been charged. And just so you remember, viewers, this is all due to a no-knock search warrant for a drug investigation by the police department. There's a lot of investigation here because one of the things that the police chief said was that there were no police body cameras, but we saw in amongst those 1,200 photos that there was in fact police body cameras. So I don't know, Devin, this story sounds like some cover up, and we're going through a lot with our country right now where we don't need law enforcement to be covering up the killing of the illegal killing of Black people. Okay. All right. No, I'll keep going there. And it's just a shame here because I think it really just goes back to the fact of when you talk about cover up, there's even more reports of them just trying to kind of tarnish her name by talking to a lot of men that kind of knew her in the past. And it's all just kind of a smear campaign to just almost tarnish her to say that, what she is doing, she wasn't justified, almost like, she was, it was forcibly killing her or something like that. I just don't get where we are with this, because we even saw that the lead prosecutor, or rather the attorney general, I think his name is Daniel Cameron. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
spoke at the RNC's national convention, but we don't see anything happening with the justice with her family. How do you have time to go and prepare a speech, but you don't have time to actually do your job? That to me is very ridiculous.
It is, and it's I question Daniel Cameron going to the Republican National Convention because, in my thoughts, I'm thinking had Daniel Cameron already brought charges against the cops who killed Breonna Taylor, would they have invited him to even speak at the convention? Because we
Mm,
heard throughout that entire convention, we back the blue, we back the police, and not saying that we don't support the police, but I think we can all agree that there was a grave mistake made and someone lost their life, at the hands
yeah.
of police who were serving a no-knock warrant for someone who wasn't there, which was her ex-boyfriend, who at the very time that they were breaking into Breonna Taylor's house, they were arresting her ex-boyfriend somewhere else. It's part of the same investigation, but they were at the wrong house. Breonna Taylor didn't do
Mm-hmm.
anything. She was just sleeping in her own house and ended up losing her life. And it's and like you say, for Daniel Cameron to go out there and speak at the Republican convention, knowing that charges still have not been brought against the people who murdered her, just goes to show you how disconnected they really are from what's happening on the ground. This is my issue with just kind of a lot of Republicans and conservatives in general. We will back the blue to no end. And not saying we don't like police, we love the police, we need them, but at the same time it is possible to acknowledge that a wrong has been done. And as the
Mm-hmm.
attorney general of a state in where someone did die at the hands of police, to go and talk against violence in democratic cities, and then you have a case of where really an innocent black woman was killed in her home sleeping, and not even to acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
it. Nobody at that convention uttered Breonna Taylor's name, or if they did, I didn't see it. But nobody talked about that case and what it means
No.
and why there hasn't been anything done to it and what we can do to fix that and avoid those things in the future. It was just strictly, I back the police, we back the blue, and that is the
Mm-hmm.
disconnect there. And like you say, we're still waiting for charges. I think in that case, out of the three officers, only one has actually been fired. The other two are on administrative leave. So we're still kind of in limbo, waiting to see if charges are going to be brought. And if they are, we've seen in the past, that's not a guarantee that they're going to be convicted. We've been down this road
No.
before where they go to court, we do the whole entire trial, and they still get off.
Yeah, and I mean it's ridiculous, because if you're really going to be the party that's preaching law and order, we've got to make sure that there's justice. Well, if you look at Kentucky's law with stand your ground, Marcus, her boyfriend, was legal in doing that, because if you look at the reporting with the 9/11 call with a lot of the neighbors, the police didn't identify themselves. I mean, they say that they identified themselves, but from all the reporting, from all the witnesses, they aren't able to produce anybody that says they actually identified themselves. And with Kentucky's law, it says that if you're standing your ground or you're doing self-defense, I mean, you're legal and doing that. You can't be prosecuted by law or state officials or something like that. So it just goes to show again this double standard that we have in our country, where the law will apply justly for Caucasian Americans, but when it comes to black and brown minority groups, it's got to be different. It's got to be our fault that we were killed. We were doing something wrong. Maybe she had some drugs in there anyways. Maybe she also had a gun illegally. It's just they're just trying to do everything they can to justify what they did, rather than owning up to it, being prosecuted for it, and then just facing the consequences. I mean, you did something you weren't supposed to do. You're trying to cover up by saying there wasn't body footage. You're trying to cover up by blaming it on the deceased or the victim. You won't even acknowledge her name when it comes to Republican officials. I mean, yet again, people say, Donald Trump's not racist. Yet again, people say that the GOP is a party for all people. This is a moment where they can stand out and be the party for all people. This is a moment where they can show, black and brown people, hey, we see that y'all are being shot and killed for no reason. We see that y'all are just trying to sleep in your own homes, but for some reason, our cops are killing you. For some reason, our laws don't follow according to justice for all, equal protection under the law. So I'm eager to see what's going to happen as a result of this. I'm hoping that what's going to happen, though, is going to be reform. We keep talking, since George Floyd, we got to see action. We got to see action from our policy lead, from our leaders in Congress. We got to see action in our local legislatures, our city councils, county commissioners. Until we see that action, this is going to continue to happen, unfortunately.
It is. It is. And it's like there's no, at least to me from the Republicans, it seems as though there's no middle ground. You either are
Mm-hmm.
completely behind the police and you back the blue, or you are totally on the side of Black Lives Matter and you hate the police. Like, it is possible to be somewhere in the middle where you understand the need of police and why they're there, but you can also call them
Mm-hmm.
out when they do things that are wrong. And this is very obvious. This was a wrong. They killed somebody sleeping in their home. It's okay to say this was wrong and the people who did it need to be prosecuted. But they are just so afraid to even look like they're soft on crime or anything like that, like they aren't protecting the suburbs, that they are just totally blind, willfully ignorant to what's going on in the neighborhoods and what's happening to a lot of black people, particularly like Breonna Taylor. I mean, this happened in March, but this really didn't blow up till really the George Floyd protests. Like, nobody, like, some people knew about it, but this story did not just explode until the George Floyd protests had happened, and then we really started to look around and see. We saw Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. Like, that happened, I believe, in February, and that video was available, but it
Mm-hmm.
had just got released, I think, over the summer, and that's when that story blew up. So these things are happening, and we don't even know about it, and we have to go back and say this was a wrong. And the fact that it's been almost 6 months since this has happened, and there are no charges, is ridiculous. Like, what else do you need? I understand justice is slow, the process is slow, the system is built to be slow, but in this case, Daniel Cameron and those are, kind of dragging their feet, trying to make sure that, this doesn't necessarily take off, and maybe, this was on purpose to where they get to a convention and don't have to say that, hey, Daniel Cameron, your speaker, just brought charges against 3 officers in Louisville. They don't want that narrative while they're trying to talk, back to blue and everything. So I think they missed an opportunity, but again, like you say, I don't think they really care about reaching out to black and brown people, really. So you can say what you want about the Democrats and them, sucking up to black people and pandering and going out
Mm-hmm.
and speaking and identity politics and everything. But at the end of the day, we might be able to get something from the Democrats to fix things like this and to get some kind of, reform, like you say, for the criminal justice system, rather than trying to negotiate with somebody who doesn't even think this is a problem in the first place.
Yeah, I mean it's insane. I would definitely admit that from their actions, they don't think this is a problem. If you thought that there was a problem in this area, your message wouldn't be loyalty to the blue line no matter what. Your position can be we need police, because I agree that police officers need to be there, but we have seen in many instances where law enforcement are called to situations where they don't have the training to deal with those situations, and people end up getting killed. So, I mean, there's definitely some room to say, yes, we love our officers. Yes, they put their lives on the line for us. But because of it, just like, in Spider-Man, when you with great power comes great responsibility. That's kind of the thing that you have to look at with them. They're pretty much people who enforce the law to the degree that their word is almost more powerful than our word. So because of that, you have to have such scrutiny in your profession that you have to be above, above this sort of foolishness here. And I think it goes just back to the fact that, if we had law enforcement who maybe went, just like lawyers who have to, practice the law, if they went through a schooling of maybe 4 years and maybe some sort of 2 or 4 year degree program for law enforcement, maybe they would understand what's going on. Maybe if we had some sort of initiative to say, well, hey, national law enforcement, we're going to introduce some culture competencies into your continuing education so that you begin to understand these communities that you're policing and don't go off of the stereotypes that you have about them, but you actually learn about the people and be engaged and involved with the people. So yeah, Devin, again, we just need better leadership. I mean, from the top, down to everybody that's involved in this case, we got to have, and like you said, justice works slow, but it doesn't work this slow.
That's true.
Or maybe it does. Maybe it does for people that look like our color.
Well, that, and if you have enough money. So the justice system operates very differently for folks who have a lot more money and different skin tones. And I mean, that's
or connections to the president, like Roger Stone and Mike Flynn. And
I mean, hey, it's all about who you know and how much money you have. I mean, that's our justice system. It works differently for everybody. I just have a feeling that
I think they call that capitalism.
They what?
I think they call that capitalism.
Exactly. So I don't know. It's frustrating, and like I say, it's been 6 months since this has happened, and we're still waiting for, charges to be brought. We're still waiting for people to be fired. There are still 2 officers on administrative leave, essentially vacation, and waiting to see what happens. So I'm not sure, but hopefully, with the Attorney General is going to be presenting his findings to a grand jury, I think either this week or next week. So it's very possible we could see some kind of action, some kind of charges come out of this. But again, we have to see this all the way through till the end. We know from past experience, it's not a guarantee when they're charged and they get to court that they're actually going to end up being convicted. So that's the other side of all of this. So that's our first segment. So we're going to take our first quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the other big story this week, which is some tapes that came out of Donald Trump talking about how he was downplaying the coronavirus and everything. And this was starting back in December of 2019 all the way to March of 2020. So we're going to go over those tapes, kind of tell you what he said and get, your thoughts and everything. So stick with us. We're going to take our very, very first quick break. All right, welcome back. So like I said before the break, we're going to get into the other big story this week, which is some tapes of Donald Trump that were released by reporter Bob Woodward. And on these tapes, you could clearly hear what is Donald Trump speaking to Woodward about the coronavirus. And in particular, you hear Donald Trump saying that he likes to, quote, play it down. He really likes to play it down. And his reasoning so far is that he doesn't want to create a panic. Now, if you know Donald Trump, you know that is not his brand. His brand is definitely to incite panic, whether it's immigration or violence in democratic cities and demonizing the protesters and the rioters and making and blowing that whole thing up. When it comes to a global pandemic, Adrian, it looks like the president wants to play it safe. And in his words, he thought he was showing strength by downplaying the threat of coronavirus. But I think a lot of people who look at us here halfway through September with almost 200,000 dead because of coronavirus, I think we all look back and think that this might be negligence in a way that could be criminal almost, with the fact that he knew the threat of coronavirus and downplayed it publicly, telling everybody it was just going to magically go away.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, speaking on this whole, I don't want to engage in fear. I want to say, whenever he came down the escalator and made his speech, one of the first things he said was, we got Mexico sending in rapists and thugs and murderers, and they're, ruining our cities. Throughout his presidency, he's talked about this caravan that's supposed to be coming up and, taking over our cities. I mean, he's trying to talk about, the suburbs being overrun by, minority groups, and they're going to ruin your schools and ruin your property value with all this low income housing. I mean, this is a guy who always uses fear, always is a bully. But here he's been caught. Here he showed, former Senator Claire McCaskill is the one who called him an idiot, but he's shown how much of an idiot he can be, because he allowed himself to be taped saying that he downplayed a pandemic when there are reports of his top aides telling him, hey, Donald, this is going to be the greatest threat of your presidency. This is going to take more focus in The Apprentice, more focus than anything you've ever done before, because this is a real situation. But what he wanted to do was play into his base and say, no, it's not going to be anything. I mean, he did 18 interviews with Bob Woodward. 18 interviews, yes. Devin. It's not like you can say, well, I did one and Bob maybe, swayed my words a little bit. He did 18 interviews with the guy, and it just shows how much of a narcissist he is, thinking that he can influence such a renowned journalist who's done books on multiple administrations, and he thought he could, fool Bob Woodward to think that he's more than what he is. But come on, viewers, listeners, Donald Trump showed himself to be who he is. I think, Maya Angelou said it, people show you who they are, believe them. Don't try to go off of this smoking gun by him doing this naturalization ceremony and saying, well, I love immigrants. I love you Black people. I pardon some of y'all. Don't go off of this. I mean, he has shown that he doesn't care about us, because it was our communities that were most affected by this. But he kept playing down that it's not going to be okay. And I think there are even reports of there's supposed to be a plan with Kushner and Trump was doing a plan to help with national testing, but they didn't implement it because it was going to help a lot of Democratic states. I mean, this is the guy who always looks at things Democrat, Republican, either for me or against me, and it wasn't affecting his family, it wasn't affecting him, so he didn't think anything of it, Devin.
I mean, he didn't. And I think what you see is that Trump, from the very beginning of his presidency, was focused on getting reelected. And this was a threat to him getting reelected. He made a calculated decision that it was better for him to downplay this publicly so that it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. And hopefully the markets wouldn't, fall off a cliff like they did, and we wouldn't have to go into, say, a national lockdown and things like that. But I mean, the president literally, so just to kind of go back to earlier this year, so on February 2nd, Donald Trump did a Super Bowl interview. And in the interview, he said the words, we pretty much shut it down coming in from China. And I think this was after he did the travel ban from China. And there were problems with that travel ban too, because even though we shut down travel, there were still like 40,000 people that came in from China after this ban went into effect. But nonetheless, February 2nd, Trump says we pretty much shut it down. And then 2 days later, during his State of the Union address, he barely mentioned COVID at all. Just basically saying his administration was going to do all the necessary steps to tackle the threat of coronavirus. But then 5 days later, on February 7th, not even a week later, the president tells Bob Woodward during one of their interviews that coronavirus spreads through the air, and that this was going to be a serious threat, and it's spreading much farther, and it's spreading through the air. And we did not have at that point, a national mask mandate. We did not have any lockdowns. This was February, and the president was still going around saying that this wasn't that bad. I think he initially started off calling the coronavirus a Democratic hoax. So it's almost like you're watching two different Donald Trumps, the one in public who's worried about his reelection, and then the man in the White House who's president, who's getting all these briefings and getting all this information. So he's getting the briefings, and he knows this is a threat, but he made a calculated decision that he did not want to risk his economy and his reelection chances because he saw the coronavirus threatening that. But what doesn't make sense to me is that Trump actually had a perfect opportunity to look like a leader and a president during a crisis. Like, you don't have to scare people, but you can say that coronavirus is a huge threat and that we need to take it seriously, instead of saying it's going to go away magically and saying we're going to go from 15 cases to 0 cases and just, saying eventually it's just going to go away. Like, he was just telling people, you need to just go about your daily lives and forget about coronavirus. And so that allowed it to spread, which then worsened the economy because things had to close down. And so it's almost like, in a way, Donald Trump is responsible for him being in this place with his reelection chances being as low as they are, and him being down almost 10 points to Joe Biden nationally. Like, he could have just come out and said, this is a threat. We need to take it seriously. We need to ramp up testing as fast as we can. I know they did a great job getting all the ventilators. We didn't end up needing them, but you didn't see that active push of lockdowns and masks and really ramping up testing to where we needed to be. We're really still not there because he thinks that higher testing means more cases. That is not how it works, but but that's what he's pushing. But it's just, it's almost like dereliction in duty is what Donald Trump did. For months he sat there telling people this was not a threat. And you don't know how many countless people may have listened to that and gone out and ate at restaurants and went on as normal, and then ended up contracting the disease and died. And the last bit before I finish is that I do think it's a little bit ironic that most of the Republicans and conservatives who happen to be mostly white party are ignoring and downplaying a virus that affects blacks and minorities more than anybody else. Where there's cases, deaths, black people and minorities are being hit hardest by this virus. And it is, to me, super ironic that the other people, particularly white folks, are downplaying the heck out of this thing, trying to open up. And so it just really goes to show the disconnect between the two Americas really that exist. The one that's really getting hit hard by this virus, and the other one that's just like, nah, we need to open up.
Yeah, I mean, it yet again just showed that Donald Trump has taken over the GOP. They've all drank the Kool-Aid, become a part of his cult. I just don't get it. This is just yet again another example of we shouldn't be surprised. Donald Trump, tried to punt his responsibility as president by saying that Woodward should have released the excerpts early, should have go ahead and put his book out early, rather than Donald Trump should have been the one addressing the nation. Much like FDR, he was basically saying, I don't want to cause a panic. But you look at other world leaders, you look at how they handled the situation. They didn't, they weren't jumping up and down as Donald Trump says. They didn't do that. They handled the situation. They made decisions about lives. They made decisions about science and about the facts. But you got this guy who's like, well, we can't say, well, what if I would have done something? Well, technically we kind of can, because we have other countries who did the opposite of what we did, and they don't have 6 million cases. They don't have nearly 200,000 dead. So we can look at, I know a lot of people are trying to say, well, you can't look at the what ifs. technically we can, because we have a bunch of developed nations who look much similar to our nation as a whole, that we can use as a model to say, well, they did X, Y, Z, and here they are almost back in schools, but here we are. I mean, can't even go back to school safely. It's like I said, again, they're trying to punt it. You had Tucker Carlson trying to blame Lindsey Graham, saying it was his fault for getting these things arranged. No, Mr. President, no, Carl Tuckerson, it's his fault. I mean, one of the other things I want to make sure, because I know we're going to go to a break, but before we leave this little segment here, one of the other things he said, speaking again to, minorities, trying to say, I'm not racist, but when Bob asked him, Mr. President, don't you think as white privileged men, we kind of live in a cave where, we might not understand where minority communities are coming from? And he was just like, Bob, no, you're drinking the Kool-Aid too much, Bob. What are you talking about coming in that? It's just like this guy, again, he doesn't even, he acknowledged that racism was there, but he also acknowledged it's not his problem. I mean, he didn't have to drink the Kool-Aid. He didn't have to be a part of the fight. He didn't have to be a part of the struggle. That's why you don't see him endorsing any of these protests. You see him calling them looters and shooters and trying to jail people who are organizing them. So again, it just shows that, I don't know what else came out of these 18 interviews. I'm sure there was more bombshells are going to be coming out, but just the stuff with how he handled the pandemic, because that's a crisis that his presidency is facing, and his comments on race relations, because that's another crisis that our country's going through at the same time, just shows you this guy's not qualified to have 4 more years. He wasn't really qualified to have the first 4 years. And for some reason, we allowed that to happen because he told us that maybe he could bring in some business efficiency, and he played into that white fear. And that's honestly, Devin, that's the saddest part about this guy, is that he really tapped into that white fear, and he really stirred up the prejudices and the racist thoughts of people. And that's scary, because when he gets out of office, which is going to be soon, we still have to deal with his base. And viewers, listeners, I don't mean deal with them in a negative way. And if you're someone who is a Trump supporter, I don't mean deal with you in a negative way, but I mean, if you're going to be a Trump supporter, what we've seen is that facts don't matter to Trump. And for a lot of his supporters, facts don't seem to matter either. So it's me as a rational adult, I'm thinking, how do you deal with someone who does not go off of facts and science? So it's going to take us some time to get back there, Devin. I'm like I said, this 4 years is going to feel like, another 10 to 20 years of just catching up.
Exactly. And just to kind of go back to, Trump, what I think is Trump is trying to do, he's trying to deflect a little bit from taking responsibility for what he said on tapes. And it's going to be really hard to me to try to wiggle out of, well, I was trying to not cause a panic when we have your public comments, we have your private comments, and we also have your comments about, the protests and everything else. I mean, you could say Trump is not inciting the rioting, but I think you'd be hard pressed to say he's turning the temperature down. He's certainly not trying to quell the unrest that's going on. I mean, if anything, he's trying to turn it up a notch so that it helps him out electorally, even though that's probably not working. But I think, just with Trump, it's disappointing, but it's almost like we expected it. I think we all kind of knew he probably knew some information. He was just downplaying the virus for, re-election reasons. But, if you don't want to cause a panic, then how about you get out the way and let your experts speak instead of you getting up on the podium and talking for 2 hours and trying to take questions and act like an epidemiologist? Like, that's how you don't cause a panic. Just let the experts answer the questions, because they know what they're talking about. And we don't need you going off the cuff saying that this is going to go away, and it's just, they get the sniffles when they get sick or something like that. That's how you don't cause a panic. Because I think the problem with his response to the virus mainly was just that there just seemed to be a nonchalantness to it. And he just didn't really care and didn't think it was that serious. And so folks were kind of
not
confused.
To cut you off, Devin. I was going to say, not to cut you off, don't forget, Devin, he also almost demonized mask wearing and said that was almost a sign of weakness if you were going to wear a mask.
That became somehow that became politicized, wearing a mask, because he didn't want to wear it in public. He didn't want the media to see him wearing one, like you say, because he saw it as being weak. So, it's just the misinformation is what really, to me, was frustrating about his response, because you could not get a straight statement from anybody in the administration. You had Dr. Fauci saying one thing, but then you had Trump over here undermining everything that he's saying. You had Dr. Berg saying another thing, and then Mike Pence was saying it was just the messaging was all over the place. And I think the problem there is that the president couldn't take just sending out his experts like Dr. Berg and Dr. Fauci and everybody else should just speak on the virus and let them take over and be the experts and get us through this. He had to be front and center and take questions, and then what he did was just made the whole situation worse and really ruined his election chances, because he's not an epidemiologist. So he just wanted to tell people.
But no, he's the best though. He'll claim that he knows more than most of the experts. He claimed that he knew more than all the generals and stuff. So he probably thinks he knows more than Dr. Fauci.
I just I'm amazed that he just says he deals in absolutes a lot. He claims he knows the most about everything a lot of times. But, I don't know. I mean, his base is still there. He's still got his support. So somebody's hearing the message and believing it.
He knows how to say those 5 words. What is it? Man, woman, people,
TV,
something
camera. So that's how you show your mental stability. Reciting 5 words.
Not by handling a global pandemic and making sure that people are aware of what's going on. Because I think he was talking about on air saying, rather publicly, young people don't need to worry about it. He's like, the younger you are, for some reason, it's like you're immune to it. It's like, I don't know, young people just best immunity. But he knew that wasn't going to be the case. He told Bob Woodward that this is going to be more than your strenuous flus. I mean, this how he said, this isn't like touch, it's the air, Bob. It's worse than touch. Yeah. And it just shows how he can't really, be, the expert can't really explain it very well. But I don't know, Devin. I know we've got some more to talk on some of the happenings of Donald Trump, and because, for some reason he always wants to be the latest in the breaking news. So that's all I can say on that.
All right, we'll leave it there. So we're going to take our second quick break. So again, I asked the question in the comments, do you think what President Trump did was correct by downplaying the virus and not trying to start a panic, as he says? Please let us know if you think that was the correct way to handle the pandemic. Put that in the comments. If you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, also put it in there. Let us know what you think. We'll read your comments. We'll read it over the air so everybody else can hear what you say. But yeah, let us know. We're trying to make this interactive. So we want to know what you think about what we're talking about, what's going on with the president and everything else. So put your comments in there, and then we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
you, Devin. I'm sorry.
All right, welcome back. So we're having some technical difficulties, so it took a little bit longer for us to get back. But we're going to get into our next story, which is about the House Intelligence Committee announced on Thursday that they had actually received a whistleblower complaint from inside the Department of Homeland Security. And in particular, this came from Brian Murphy, who he's a career public servant and former acting undersecretary of INA, who alleges that there was a pattern of misconduct among top political appointees of President Trump, who actually pushed Mr. Murphy to alter what was vetted intelligence assessments to support or match the president's remarks. And specifically, the complaint alleged that acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf, under the direction of the White House, had instructed him to stop producing intelligence reports that centered on Russian intelligence efforts and instead focus on threats posed by China and Iran. And of course, from the very moment that Donald Trump got into office, there was a cloud hanging over him about the Russia investigation and what that entailed and what they were looking for, and particularly Bob Mueller. He called that a witch hunt from the very, very beginning. And so what we see here is it looks like that the Trump administration has been specifically targeting folks who work in the Department of Homeland Security to ensure that the reports that President Trump is getting are showing him things that he wants to see. And so even though we all are probably certain that Russia's going to be trying to interfere in this election again, I mean, why wouldn't they? They were successful in 2016. It's only natural to think that they're going to try to do it again here in 2020. But Secretary Chad Wolf has apparently has told Brian Murphy that he needs to gear these intelligence reports to show not only Russian interference efforts, but also threats posed by China and Iran, both of which, who of course have picked someone that they want to win the White House. But we're not entirely sure if the threat of China and Iran rises to the level that Russian interference has, like what we saw in 2016.
Yeah, Devin, I don't know what to say about this one. It's a lot. It's a lot going on with the Justice Department. I don't understand, or rather the intelligence community. I don't understand how we have a president who can just blatantly, just step in and do these sorts of things. And we have his supporters who will back him up and be okay with it. I'm really glad to see that, that the House is going to be investigating this. I mean, and again, listeners, viewers, it's not about, harping on Donald Trump. It's not anything like that. Obviously, if the Russians, the Iranians, China, it doesn't matter who's interfering in our elections, whoever it is, we need to investigate it. But when you have someone who's trying to alter the narrative, which is kind of a common theme for Trump, always trying to figure out how to change the situation, and he's always trying to get it off of Russia. I mean, there's just, for some reason, he's always trying to get off of Russia. And I mean, I think it goes back to the fact of his statements that I don't have any business dealings in Russia. I think that that's a little bit inaccurate. And I think that, a lot of this cozying up to Putin was just really to kind of cushion Donald Trump's pocketbook, because he knows that his time in the White House is very limited. But I don't understand why you would have someone trying to muddy the waters with this situation. I mean, we're talking about, election security. We're talking about white supremacy. I mean, come on now. You have a guy who says he's not racist, but tries to bury reports about white supremacy. I don't know how you really equate the two. I don't know how those add up. I mean, I guess if it talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's got to be a duck there. So I'm just like, I don't understand what's going on. Again, another opportunity for Donald Trump to abuse his power as president. Another opportunity for him to just really just try to get away with this. Yeah,
Sorry.
Viewers and listeners. No, it's all good. That's how it is whenever you work from home and different things like that. Eventually, we'll be like MSNBC, where we'll be at the studio or whatever.
Exactly. I swear this is 2020 in a nutshell, trying to do stuff from home. But yeah, so I think what you see is that what we haven't seen in past administrations is you see the president actively trying to, you know, influence what are supposed to be objective government institutions like the Department of Homeland Security, trying to use them for, you know, for ways to help him in his reelection campaign. And so what, like you say, it's not just suppressing, you know, intelligence reports on Russia. He's also trying to get them to modify intelligence assessments so that it matches his the things he's saying about Antifa, and also trying to minimize the threat posed by white supremacists. And so we know in this environment that the protests turned violent, and there is evidence to actually suggest that that violence may be perpetrated by some folks who are white supremacists. This is not, you know, just some rumor. There's actually evidence to suggest that white supremacists are out there, you know, trying to incite riots and start violence at what are supposed to be peaceful protests. And so Trump and conservatives really harped on Antifa and Black Lives Matter for being almost terrorist organizations, and particularly Antifa. They hopped on that hard after Minneapolis and saying that it was Antifa who started these violent riots, and that was actually not true. Over 80% of the people who have been arrested in Minneapolis were local residents. They had no ties to Antifa or any other movement like that. But what you see is the president trying to influence what's coming out of government agencies so that it matches what he's saying in public. So it looks as though what he's saying is true. And so this, to me, is just another negative story. I mean, this September has really been a rough month for President Trump and just his administration as a whole. Usually we get these surprises in October, but September has been a rough month, whether it's the Atlantic article about him calling soldiers suckers and losers, whether it's, you know, now this new whistleblower complaint coming forward. We see Bob Woodward releasing tapes of him downplaying coronavirus. But what's worrisome is that he's appointing people in government agencies who he feels as though should be working for him and helping him politically. And so you saw that with James Comey. You know, when he was having Comey come to the White House and meet with him, he was asking him essentially, am I going to have your loyalty so that when the Russia investigation started to get going, Comey would be there to kind of, you know, insulate the president from that. And Comey, of course, put out, you know, his notes saying that he didn't feel comfortable with that. And of course, he was subsequently fired by President Trump. So I know it's just, these are supposed to be objective institutions. They have been normally. Yes, the people who work there may have their own political leanings, but overall they're supposed to be objective, and they don't work for the president. The president seems not to understand that, but he's going to make sure that he puts in people who are loyal to him politically and will do what he asks. And so this whistleblower is highlighting what, you know, Trump and the administration is doing behind the scenes.
You know, I think Donald just thinks he thinks he's either the king, or maybe he thinks he's a constitution, because he forgets that when these people come in their positions, they sign an oath to the Constitution. They don't sign an oath to the president. So maybe he thinks, maybe he just doesn't understand that he's not the Constitution or something. I don't know. Maybe he's, because he's so simple-minded, maybe we've got to really just try to figure out, tell him, Donald, you're not the Constitution. People don't, you know, pledge loyalty to you. It's about the American people. It's, you know, for the people, by the people. That's the mantra of the government.
You know, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you know, he does have an affinity and a likeness for Xi Jinping in China, who's now, you know, essentially a dictator. He has no term limits. And then also Kim Jong-un in North Korea. We know that they send a lot of letters back and forth. And so there's a relationship there for, you know, for dictators and people who are in power for you know, like Putin, who doesn't have term limits.
And wasn't it, I think it was in one of those letters, it was, I think Kim Jong called him His Excellency or something like that. And it just blew his head up. I mean, it just really just made this guy feel like he was on top of the world. And I mean, just another example, viewers and listeners, of how Donald Trump is trying to really tarnish our institutions. I mean, he's got the Justice Department, you know, and his sycophant, you know, Bill Barr, trying to intervene on a defamation case. I mean, you have columnist E. Jean Carroll, who alleges that the president raped her, and I think it was Bloomingdale in the 90s. But you've got the Justice Department trying to step in and say, well, when Donald Trump said that I didn't do it and she's not my type and I would have never done it, it's fictitious, they're trying to say that that was the president acting in his presidential duties. So that you can't sue him for that. We're instead of it being a Trump versus Carroll case, it's going to be the United States government versus Carroll, and you can't sue the government for defamation. So what? I mean, I don't understand, Devin, how we can have Republican leadership who can back this. This guy is literally using taxpayer dollars to fund his private suits where he did something that he shouldn't have done.
Right. And just to kind of put a little context to it, so like just doing some reading and listening to one of a podcast I was listening to. So this particular, like the government stepping in during this defamation case, I think they do this for government employees. Like if you say something as a government employee, and you get sued by someone, the government can step in because you are technically a government employee. The thing that's different with this case is that this defamation case has been going on since, like, I believe last year. So this isn't necessarily new. It's just that now, right before right after a judge had greenlit this to go into discovery, and which means we could have actually seen the president be called for a deposition. That's when the government decided, okay, now we want to come in and step in and say the president was acting, as he was doing his duties as president when he made these comments about Miss Carroll. So it's going to be interesting because in order for them to say that he made those comments, they're going to want to investigate whether the comments were even true. And to do that, you have to also investigate whether or not this whole, this allegations are true and whether he did rape her actually. So we could see this go further. Now it's going to slow down a lot now that the federal government is involved. But it is interesting that right before right after a judge had said this case could move forward to discovery, the federal government and, like you say, Bill Barr jumps in and says, no, we're going to represent the president from here on out. So, it's just, again, like you say, our political institutions are just being, it looks like they're being used for, political reasons or personal reasons because he is the president and he is just applying, he's appointed folks who have said, I'm here to essentially protect you, and I'm loyal to you. And so this is something we've never really seen before, not at this scale where you have the Department of Homeland Security, the Justice Department now all becoming like these political institutions that are there to simply serve the president and not the people.
Yeah, I mean, you have Bill Barr before he was Attorney General. He did the op-ed pretty much saying the president, is pretty much can do whatever he wants. He can't be impeached for anything. I mean, I think he was pretty much writing that op-ed as kind of like a resume to Donald Trump saying, I know you didn't like Jeff Sessions, but here I am. I'm behind you. You can, if you appoint me, I'll let you do whatever you want. I'll even help you do it. I mean, because the other thing, to kind of talk about his abuse of our Justice Department. Last year you had Barr appoint John Durham to investigate the origins of the Russia investigation. And viewers, listeners, regardless of how you feel about Bob Mueller, regardless of how you feel about the dossier and all these other things, the ending conclusion of that report was that Russia was systematically intervening in our elections, and they were going to do it again. I mean, that was the theme of it, and that there was no collusion, but the Trump administration did cozy up and kind of allow some things to happen. And you basically have the president who's always trying to get his name away from Russia. You got him trying to say, well, John Durham, go investigate the origin of the story and figure out what's going on. But you had this week, one of the top aides to John Durham actually resigned because of pressure to go ahead and produce a report before they had finished their investigations. So again, you've got somebody who's basically just trying to say, well, I get that, Bob Mueller did what he was supposed to do. I get that the entire intelligence community has put forth their efforts to tell me this, but I'm not going to care about that. I have no reason to doubt, Putin. He he told me that he didn't do it. So he didn't do it. He wasn't part of it. But again, we have a president who is listening to people other than his advisors, other than our institutions. Because, like Devin said, these people don't care about party. I mean, these are career officials who served both Republican and Democratic administrations. Some of them have donated to Democratic campaigns. Some of them have donated to Republican campaigns. But they care about their duty. They care about the job. They care about preserving the Constitution and the will of the people. But you've got a president who really cares more about himself, his family, and his pocketbook, and not all the other stuff.
Yep. I mean, that's Donald Trump, and I think that's what makes him different than any other president, is that he has appointed folks to roles with the idea that they serve him and not, the American people, and the rest of us. So, it's going to be interesting to see if Donald Trump does end up losing when Joe Biden and that administration gets in there. What are they going to be walking into as far as what has been done behind the scenes, to essentially just take the rule of law and tear it in half and just forget about trying to follow any kind of, rules or anything like that. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they uncover as far as what the president has tried to do. Just think about, we're hearing about the things he has done already. What about the things we don't hear that he's tried to do that are probably so far illegal and so much worse? That's the part that scares me, is what is he trying to do that he wasn't able to do? Because he's done a lot of things that are terrible, but I'm pretty sure there's more stuff behind the scenes that we don't hear about that he's trying to do that are probably far, far worse. So with that, that'll do it for this segment. We're going to take our next break, and then we'll come back and get into some more news about fundraising and the campaign, and then we'll have our quick hits, and then we will get out of here and let you get on with your Saturday. So remember, put your comments in the Facebook and YouTube comment section. Let us know, what you think about Trump and the DOJ and the new whistleblower here in the Russian investigation. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we will see you after the break. Sorry, here we're still having technical difficulties, but so we're in our last segment here. So we're gonna go over our quick hits and some fundraising news from the campaign. So just to kind of start off, the first story here is going to be about the money that has been raised during this campaign. So for last month in August, Joe Biden and the Democratic Party actually raised $364 million, which is a record for 1 month of fundraising, while Donald Trump and the Republican National Committee raised about $210 million in August. So that's about $150 million difference. That's a lot of millions rolling around. And so what this shows is that there's a lot of money there, but this also shows a possible problem for the Trump campaign, because there is a possibility that Donald Trump will have to plug in more of his own money for his campaign to make it through the November election. And so the Trump campaign has also pulled back on money that's being spent in key states. And so it may be a sign that the campaign knows that there is some trouble ahead as far as the election and everything else.
And on to another story, kind of talking about campaign contributions. So just so you know, viewers and listeners, if you're going to encourage somebody to donate, don't try to reimburse them, because it's against the law. You're not supposed to do that. But we have, just in case you didn't know that, but we have our Postmaster General who's been accused of doing that. Louis DeJoy has been accused by some of his employees of basically telling them to donate to the GOP and they'll basically get it back. And we have the North Carolina Attorney General Stein that said that these allegations, I mean, they merit investigations. You even have David Young, which is Louis DeJoy's HR director of HR for his company, New Breed, said that basically they gave, and then their bonuses were bigger and exceeded expectations and even covered taxes and everything. So again, you can encourage people to donate, but don't try to give it back to them.
There you go. So our next story is going to come from Capitol Hill, where we are all still waiting to see if there's going to be any more coronavirus relief that's going to be sent out. The Republicans on Thursday proposed what they call a skinny coronavirus bill that was about $500 billion, but House Democrats and Senate Democrats shut that down almost immediately, and that bill did not get enough votes it didn't get enough votes in the Senate to pass, as far as being able to pass without a filibuster. So no Democrats supported it. The skinny bill from Republicans, did not include any money for stimulus checks. So of course that was a non-starter. And it did include an additional $300 in weekly unemployment benefits. But again, there's still a huge difference between the, $2.5, almost $3 trillion that the Democrats passed in the HEROES Act versus this skinny Republican coronavirus bill that you see that they're trying to pass. And this is really almost like a Hail Mary, to try to say, hey, we tried to do something. It's not a lot, but it's something, to take to the polls with them as we get into the November campaign.
And just to kind of talk about November, Microsoft actually detected some attacks from other countries on our elections. According to the Associated Press, the same Russian military intelligence outfit that hacked the Democrats in 2016 has renewed their efforts in trying to breach, looks like, about 200 organizations, including political campaigns and their consultants. And this happened around Thursday. Looks like most of the attempts were Russian, Chinese, and Iranian agents. So just as a disclaimer, it is more than other countries, but we want to make sure everybody knows that, it's not just China, it's Russia, China, and Iranian agents that were trying to do this. It seems like that the Chinese were actually kind of targeting the high profile individuals with the election, including people associated with the Biden campaign. And it looks like the Iranian hackers were unsuccessful in their attempts to try to target the Trump campaign and his administration. But again, this is kind of going back to what we talked about in one of our episodes, where we said election security is real and there is a growing need for there to be some legislation passed to help this area.
Right. So in our next story, in our very last quick hit, we're going to talk about 9/11 a little bit. So we celebrated, I think it was the night, well, not celebrated, but I acknowledged I think this is 19 years since 9/11. Mm-hmm. And when that happened yesterday, there was a story that came out yesterday that claimed that the Trump administration has siphoned nearly $4 million from the New York City Fire Department's fund for its 9/11 first responders. Now there is some discrepancy and some pushback here, particularly from the Department of Treasury, where they claim the money was diverted because of debt owed by New York City to the federal government. And the Treasury also disputes the claim of the $4 million by saying it was only actually about half that, about 1.9 million was actually siphoned off. And so this report, like I said, the report came out yesterday on September 11th. So again, there was some money siphoned off from the New York City Fire Department's fund for 9/11 first responders. Treasury says this was because that New York City actually owed the federal government money. So that is our last quick hit, and that is our show for today. Again, put your comments in the comment section on Facebook and YouTube. You can always follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Black Agenda Pod. You can also rewatch our shows here on YouTube at Black Agenda Pod, or just search Black Agenda Podcast. You can rewatch this. This will be uploaded later today, and the audio version should be available tomorrow. So with that, Adrian, you got any last thoughts?
No, other than don't forget, guys, we're trying to, donate to charities. We're trying to build scholarship funds. We're even trying to eventually start our own nonprofit so we can really start to lobby and push for policies and initiatives. So don't forget that you can donate to our mission and our cause at patreon.com/Black Agenda Pod. And that's patron.com/Black Agenda Pod. We're looking to do some real change in our communities, not just bring you the news, not just talk about stuff, but we're actually looking to move the ball forward. But unfortunately, in a capitalistic society, that does require some funding. So so just remember that. But no, Devin, this is awesome. I'm glad that we're doing these live weekly roundups. We're going to keep bringing them to you, listeners and viewers.
Definitely. And just to give you a preview of what we have coming up as far as our podcast episodes in general, again, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're on Podbean, Stitcher, all of it. Wherever you listen to your music, you can find us. Just search for the Black Agenda Podcast. But coming up here at the end of this month, we'll have an interview with a board member of the Elections and Registration Board in Fulton County, Georgia, which includes Atlanta. We'll be talking to him. His name is Aaron Johnson, about election security and mail-in voting and what that entails. So we'll also have an upcoming episode about the Second Amendment and gun laws and gun activity that's going on in the country, and kind of, really talk about what our relationship is with the Second Amendment. And then, of course, we'll end this month with a really, really good interview with Mary Frances Winters, who has a book coming out that's going to be about Black mental health and how the fight against racism affects you mentally. So it's a really good, interesting subject that we don't talk about a lot. So we'll talk to her at the end of this month. And so look out for that. Again, make sure you subscribe to us and listen. If you haven't listened to our previous episodes, of course, always go back and listen. We've had some great guests, some really good interviews, and some good topics. So until next time, we'll catch you later.